All right.
Okay,
Think we're good?
it is.
All right. We're live.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Welcome to the Kirkwood Center podcast for Theology and Ethics. I'm not going to go into a long intro today. We're going to be talking about what I'm willing to call the martyrdom of Charles James Kirk. Charlie Kirk, everybody knows now, was murdered 2 days ago, 9/10, which I think is going to be it's a historic moment. I think it's going to be right up there with 9/11. Obviously, it's different in some senses, but when I heard the news, it had the same kind of weight, as far as I'm concerned, as something like 9/11. So we want to talk about this. I got Lenny on, Vice President of the Kirkwood Center. Logan Zeppieri. Logan, are you in? Where are you right now? Are you in DC?
Yeah, I'm in DC.
All right, Logan's in DC. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a somber reflection here, but there's a couple points I think. I mean, when I wrote the article, the Patheos article, which we'll pull up in a second, I usually don't like to comment too quickly on tragedies like this, because I feel I'm always nervous about trying to profiteer off of something terrible. But I just feel it demanded a response. And we're calling this the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk, because I really, the more I learn and the more I think about it, I think that is a title that he deserves. Minimally, martyrdom for the cause of political truth, and which is important, right? But also, and we'll get into this a little bit more later towards the end. I mean, the man shared the gospel like repeatedly to hundreds and thousands of people publicly. And although, we still don't know all the motivations of the shooter. I mean, minimally, we say this was an outspoken Christian man who shared his faith in Christ, who shared the gospel explicitly, openly. And, I think that the title, the moniker martyr, is not too strong a word for this guy. So anyways, let's back up. We'll back up a bit. Maybe that was just my little monologue to try and get us going here. If people want to chime in and ask questions or put comments in the live stream, we'd be more than happy to respond to them. Lenny, I think you're tracking that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just look quickly at some of the details, what we know. Logan, I mean, why don't you give us the rundown of what we know so far, and then maybe some quick reflections on just the facts of the matter.
Yeah, Charlie was at his opening event for his American tour. He was giving, if you've been to his events or anything like that where he's talking and taking questions, stuff like that, it was a college event. I think, I don't know, maybe it's one of the situations where I feel like it was so thoroughly covered on social media, and when I got the message that it was happening, it was all just sort of basically swing by swing updates from when he was shot. There was a lot of unknowns that about what was exactly happening, his body being carried. I was in a lot of the text chats that were updating, did he make it to the hospital, when he got to the hospital, what was going on, those sorts of things. But as far as what happened, he was shot in the neck. It was extremely graphic.
Yeah.
It was. I think that was probably one of the first things when people were like, oh, pray for a miracle. If anyone who saw the video, it was immediately devastating. If you had known, I have a lot of family in the medical field or the firefighting field, and when you saw the shot, it was very clear that anything short of a miracle is not. It's not looking good.
Yeah.
But I think those are the facts of the situation. Generally speaking, the shooter, I guess, was um, apprehended just earlier today. Um, it seemed like I think they had arrested 3 different people for different reasons. One was ultimately charged with obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
I think there's probably going to be a lot of investigations on why that happened or how that happened or why there was so much like we have the guy, no, he's not the guy. We'll re-arrest the guy for something else. Oh, now we have this other guy. Now we have this third guy. Um, that seemed like it was the uncertainty there was causing a lot of drama. And then now I think right now the whole X feed is just, how they find the gun, who they find, does he match the original description, does he match the video description? So now it's just all this. That's kind of
Yeah.
where it's at now, I think.
I mean, one of the things, and Lenny, one of the things, and you speak to this too, one of the things that I've started worrying about fairly early, and I think it's just inevitable and I guess unavoidable, given the way our culture is right now, is the slew and the onslaught of conspiracy theory stuff that comes out. I mean, there was one that was so ridiculous, and it looks like it may have even involved Frank Turek,
Right.
where
The hand
people are
signal.
putting up a picture where I guess Frank Turk was in the background. He had a white hat and a white shirt on, and he's just like touching his hat right before the shot. And somebody was spreading this idea that this guy behind Charlie Kirk was giving hand signals to the shooter, which is so stupid if you know anything about sniping. You don't need somebody on the ground giving hand signals next to your target. You got a scope on. I mean, it's so bad. But I'm one of the things that I just don't know how to avoid it. But you know what's going to come as well. Like the Mossad was behind it. That'll be there. I saw
That's already been out.
that Trump was behind it because of the Epstein files. So, I mean, I really like it, which just adds sort of like an air of, it adds more malevolence and stupidity to what is already something that is difficult enough to process. Right. But I don't even know how to deal with that. I don't know if you want to speak to this.
Well,
this piece of it.
there's 2 aspects to this that I want to talk about. First of all, yes, you have the social media diarrhea, that everybody who has any thought that's popped into their heads spews it on social media, and somebody else picks it up and runs with it. Now, you have to realize in this case that most people have no idea what they're talking about on all sides of this issue. So, for example, there is a sub idea circulating that it couldn't have been, it had to be a professional hit. This was going on quite a bit. Oh, it had to be a professional hit because it was from a far distance using a scope, this kind of thing. Well, you wouldn't dismiss that by talking to anyone who's done any kind of sniper training. They would never aim for the head. They would never aim for the neck. You take large, you aim for large
Center
mass of the body. I mean, just because of, look what happened when the attempted assassination on Trump. You turn your head between the time the trigger is pulled and the bullet reaches the target, and you miss. And professionals know these kinds of things. So also this idea that it couldn't have been him, and I'm saying, oh, that doesn't look like the kid in the original image because his lips are different. Things of that. Look, they have palm prints. Okay, that you can pretty much rule out whether you've got the right guy or not, because you could take prints of their palms, which are just as definitive and unique as prints of fingers. So fingerprints, palm prints, it doesn't matter. We can immediately identify whether this was the individual who climbed off that roof or not. It's easy to just speculate. And the problem is, as people speculate, as they spew these ideas, what happens is it starts to gain groundswell. Now, you mentioned the idea that the Jews were behind it. There are some tracings of some of these posts on X, and they're looks like they're coming from Russian and China bot farms. In other words, they're using these fake accounts in order to kind of stir the pot on this and get people here who are already anti-Semitic to jump on that bandwagon and, again, distract us. All of this is meant to either sow discord, which is exactly the concept that the left wanted to happen. This is what Antifa and those want to exist. Yeah, I think Charlie Kirk, as Charlie Kirk, taking Charlie Kirk out is a secondary aspect of the broader idea of to just sow discord in our society and unstabilize the ideas or the ways to engage and change the world for the better. So think of this, for example. One of the outcomes of this may very well be that on-campus debate and exchange is suppressed,
Yeah.
not because Antifa is going to shoot per se the individual speaker who's showing up, but because campus security will now require higher levels of policing, higher levels of
Yeah, it'll
security
just
for
become
any event, which would make it,
untenable.
it makes it fiscally untenable. These are
Yeah.
campus clubs for the most part. They don't have large budgets.
Yeah.
And so either way, you know, the side that wants to silence the debate wins. And again, that's a really big concern on my part.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I mentioned, and we should say, with just going back to the shooter, like, it's still somewhat ambiguous exactly
Really,
what his
really.
motivations were. It sounds like his father turned him in, and that his father was a retired police officer. So here I mean, as far as his skill was, I mean, he's probably somebody who did grow up around firearms and knew how to
He took
use
him
them.
hunting. Yes.
Yeah,
It
and
was
this
a
is
single action bolt
yeah,
rifle.
it's not a hard shot. It's 180. It's 200 yards. It's not a hard shot. It's a standard shot with a hunting rifle. So the engravings on the casings were a little bit ambiguous, with the exception of the one which called him a fascist, which clearly used the term fascist for him. So, I mean, there's still stuff coming out there. Look, I think we could definitely say it's politically, it's a political assassination. It's a politically motivated. It could be a religiously motivated one. We don't know. And those two things can't just so easily be separated either, right? Because as I wrote in the article, and I think many people, not only was he preaching the gospel when he was on campus, but he was very clear that his political views, especially his views on defending the right of the unborn, sanctity of marriage, all the things that we defend here, were grounded in his Christian worldview. I mean, when we were on campus, well, Lenny, you weren't there, but I was there with another colleague of ours last year at Cal State Fullerton, and we were doing campus evangelism. I didn't know that he was that outspoken of a Christian. Then when everybody was rushing to see him, they were kind of running by our booth, to get to him. And later, when I started watching more of his videos, I'm like, God, he's talking about Jesus all the time.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting dichotomous case study if you put these two guys together, because Robinson is only 9 years younger. And it looks like he came from a fairly traditional and somewhat conservative upbringing. I don't know. Again, we don't know a whole lot about him, but it does seem to be that he inhabited certain Antifa chats and Discord and things like that. And he did have the slogan, the Italian song Ciao Bella, that Antifa
reminiscent
adopts.
of the Italian resistance against
That's right. The
Nazis.
communist, specifically communist resistance to Mussolini.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but here's an interesting thing. And I'm just going to say there are many students, and what was more heartbreaking and what we can actually know is there were people going on other campuses that same day, videotaping student reactions to Charlie's assassination. And the students expressed joy, expressed happiness. They had been definitely inculcated into this ideology and into this cult. And when Charlie Kirk first at 17 or so became politically aware and politically engaged, he started down the path of trying to establish conservative ideals and push those. He wasn't engaged as a on fire Christian.
Yeah, that's right.
He thought religion was very nominal.
Right.
It
Al
was
Mohler
at-
made that point recently. He said when he
Yeah.
first met Kirk about 7 or 8 years ago, Kirk was almost like reluctant about
Right.
Christianity because he thought it was hindering, but he must have had some kind of.
But this is the point.
Yeah.
It's like Charlie Kirk was surrounded by people who said, look, our conservatism has to be grounded in our Christianity because that's where our morality comes from. And Kirk, as he listened, he was persuaded, he was changed, he was moved, and he finally accepted the fact that, yes, Christianity is real, and it's from that reality that all of these other things flow. And it's just, my point is, it's just so easy to send your kids off to school and have them just as completely be moved from somewhat moderate or conservative viewpoint all the way to a radical leftist position where you're celebrating the assassination of an individual, as we've seen over and over again online. So it's an interesting dichotomy that both of those tracks happened kind of in concert. And it really depends on who you're hanging around and what you're consuming, what you're digesting, and how well those ideas are rooted or grounded in true reality or just simple violence and objection to the status quo.
Okay, Logan, we don't know. We know that the shooter was not at that university. But I mean, Rob Gagnon, shortly after the shooting, put up a tweet about the takeover of our universities, the total dominance of our universities by leftist ideology. And this is not novel in human history. I mean, whoever runs the schools sort of runs the culture, right? In that country. I mean, and the left has always aimed at the institutes of higher education. And we've been talking about this for years, how, I mean, conservative speakers, they come up on the campus, pull the fire alarm. Conservative speakers come, massive protests, just all kinds of nasty, vitriolic rhetoric. This was all sort of in Gagnon's post. Actually, let me see if I can pull it up, because then, Logan, I want to talk about, this problem of just, yeah, here it is. Let me see if I can share the screen, and we can.
Yeah, while you're working on that, I'll just make a quick comment. I do think
Yeah.
that while there's like interesting case studies or interesting like ways of looking at this in a very like 1,000-foot view, I do think that there should be the sort of like here and now engagement with like the things that are happening and as they're unfolding. And I think this is what we're seeing, especially on X and what we're with the people I'm speaking to. But okay, it looks like you pulled up the.
Yeah, I mean, let's just
Well,
read
let's
it.
go to
This is from Rob Gagnon, the New Testament scholar, formerly or maybe still at Pittsburgh University. Charlie Kirk died of an assassin's bullet to his neck on a Utah college campus. I blame the left, not just this lone assassin. Even in reporting on Kirk being shot, the leftist media couldn't help themselves, referring to Kirk as divisive and polarizing without any self-awareness that he was expressing views held by at least half the country. Every kind of leftist imaginable speaks at college campuses around the country every single day of the year. Nearly all the college professors on college campuses are left to hard left. And we know this from talking to guys like Corey Miller and stuff, right? The statistics on left to right at all the major universities is just, they're incredible. They're totally disparate. Leftists run no danger of being shot, but a conservative who speaks on campus puts his or her life at risk. They are called divisive, as if leftists are not divisive. Hateful, ignorant bigots, and a threat to students. This has got to stop. And the left bears full responsibility for campus violence, calling any speech that differs from their hard left sexual and racial agenda hate speech. I couldn't agree more with that. I just couldn't agree more with that.
Yes, and I just posted about it. I think, you read the tenor of the media as it was unfolding, like, and then now in their reflection, I do think that there is a realization on the left, in their calls for even my friends and stuff like that, or on social media, or people who I'm like more loosely affiliated with in some sort of like capacity, that the calls for unity and de-escalation, and some of the sort of like low level, like, well, I think Vox did it this way, where it was like, well, when they went after Trump, it wasn't that bad. Like the Republicans sort of acted moderation, and we hope they do the same. There is this sort of understanding, implicit understanding, that they know they've gone too far. They've been going too far too long, and that they, in fact, do warrant some form of retaliation. I think righteous retaliation. Whether that comes down the pike, I don't know. And I think that's the discussion the right's having among themselves right now. It's sort of like the left knows they're outside the room, and there's this tragedy. Everything right now is focused on honoring who Charlie was. It's focused on proper ceremony. We're going to do the flag. One of the representatives was like, we should maybe introduce a resolution for burial at the rotunda if the family wants. Like, all of this is ceremony. You have Vance canceling his flight to New York City and his 9/11 participation, going to personally escort Kirk back home. So everything right now is very in mourning and ceremony. And the debate that's happening right now is, okay, then once the ceremony is over, what's next? And
Yeah.
so far, it's just been, we're scraping all the social media accounts. We're going to go after all these people and their jobs right now. That's been the response. But the high level political response, I know some people in high and sort of influential places are like, first thing is that the shooter needs to be executed on Trump's watch. It cannot wait for another administration to come in. There's other arguments about, do we make sure that we start going after anyone who's like in a professional capacity? So the outrages right now has been, or the focus has been on the ceremony, and the debate now is like, what do we do next? And there's been a lot of conversation. If it's Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, we can go down the list. I mean, those are two that have been very close. Actually, Candace's memorial video, I think, is worth watching. Very reflective. She shares a lot of like personal, and because she was there sort of at the beginning with them.
Turning point at the beginning.
Yeah, with Turning Point. Yeah, exactly. And so when it was a Gagnon, when he, his post is, it's blaming left. I think that's correct, and I think the left knows that that's correct, at least implicitly, because they know they're the targets on this one. It's not as ambiguous as they're hoping it becomes ambiguous at best.
Well,
You also had Schumer and Hakeem come out and be like, well, we need to de-escalate. It's like, well, no, they know that's the problem.
Right. You can't say we did all this damage, now let's de-escalate. And here's I think AOC's problem was really indicative of this issue, because she had a speech scheduled, I believe, in Upper New York with a bunch of supporters on Saturday. And she said she canceled the speech, first of all. She said, and she had to do so because of, quote, safety concerns, end quote. Now, that's disingenuous. Nobody is shooting at, this kid is not shooting at leftist folks like AOC. Besides, she's a congressional representative. She has a much broader security detail before she speaks. What really happens is she knows that she's stuck, because if she steps up to a podium on Saturday and decries the violence against Charlie Kirk being shot, her base will not stand for it. She has cultivated such a radicalized base that they would be offended at her, and she may lose support because she decries the violence. If she doesn't decry the violence and the people are cheering about it, then how is she going to get another election in that regard? So she's stuck either way. This is kind of one of the problems. This is the Gordian knot that the left is tied for itself. It's just, there's just no escaping it. There's no good way out. So what they want to say is de-escalate, dial the temperature back, and then we can go back to the rhetoric that we have used in the
Yeah,
past.
I'm not hopeful. I honestly, I'm not hopeful. It'll get dialed back momentarily, but it's just the pattern is there. I mean, there was a good article by I think Jim Garrity in National Review about moral equivalence, where he goes through all of these apparent attacks on liberal or left-leaning politicians. You know, and the thing is, when you look at like the Paul Pelosi attack, or even this attack on what was it, the Minnesota Logan, was it the Minnesota state representative and his wife?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the people, the perpetrators, it's hard to say that they were politically motivated. The one guy was just both of them looked just absolutely nuts. Like absolutely nuts, like deranged, just, you know, especially the Pelosi attacker. Now, that's not to say, and I put this in the article, that there isn't a right-wing version of political violence. There is, there always has been, and there certainly can be. But the pattern is I just think obviously in the other direction.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing that I think most people on the right do see. The radical right is primarily located in these fringe areas, and the left will be very open about it. They'll be like, oh, on this Discord chat, or on this or that, you know, that or that publishing house way over in the corner. But when you talk about radical leftism, you're just pointing to the local teacher. And that's the concern, is that the local leftist teacher who's, you know, my brother, for example, just got this DEI assignment, which is to talk about how he's, you know, on the intersection of privilege and how that has like disadvantaged other people at his expense. Like the radical left degrading humanity is coming from people in the mainstream left, and
Right.
that is what they've really targeted and
The
ratcheted down on.
ideology, and I wrote this in the article, the ideology of what's the cult of the victim mindset. The ideology that that the left sort of promotes, where you are a pure victim, and because you are a pure victim, you have moral superiority over anybody who disagrees with you politically or socially, right? That cult of the victim mindset that guys like Paul Hollander wrote about, or Charles Taylor even mentions in I quote it in Secular Age, where it's the total demonization of your enemy, the feeling of moral superiority, the feeling that you are morally clean, right? That, you know, that to sort of reference, so that the line of good and evil doesn't run also through your own heart.
Yeah.
You know, and that also it's like, I hate to say it, but it's a godless sort of it's a godless platform. If there's a moral law on this platform, it's made up by the platform, by the political party, right? This is not
Well,
this is
like
not
look at
Yeah.
so everyone on the right has seen this. You know, when you'd go every time there was some tragedy or something,
Yeah.
there was all the left. I mean, maybe like 10 years ago, we could probably see the beginnings of this, where anytime there was some like, you know, heinous act or like some heinous left-wing ideology you just didn't, you know, take your shirt off and support, it was unfriend me, you're a horrible evil person who wants to kill all my friends. Like it was always unhinged and deranged for so long.
Yeah.
And the right would be like, most often the right would be like, well, I would never believe something like that and tell my friends to do it, so I'm not going to unfriend them. And then ultimately you'd post something like, hey, we need to pray for our country because of this, and then you'd be attacked. Prayers aren't good enough. You're just condoning violence, and they'd unfriend you anyways. And so, like, this has been going on for so long. We've sort of imputed what we think is the left's moral response to us, but it's just not. And I think with the assassination of Charlie, it's hitting more people, not just people on the right, but even some of my centrist friends who I would get into like full arguments over different moral contentions because they're like, I think the left has something good to offer. I think the right has some good offer. They're posting now like, no, it's over. Like I cannot ever vote for the Democrat Party until they totally dismantle their entire philosophy and rebuild something new. And this is what
Yeah.
we're seeing is like they're finally getting it that it's not so much the right's call to view the left as your enemy and not as your neighbor. It's the right, finally, the message getting through to even the centrists that the left actually hates you, and they've been posting it for years, and they've meant it. And these aren't just like fringe people. These were people on my like friends list that I
Yeah,
knew growing
there is.
up in
Yeah,
school and Christian camps that have been saying, "You, Logan, are an evil person because you do not support my ideology." And and I left that, a few years into it, like it's going to get worse. But it's now the centrist people are realizing, like, I think I'm projecting a moral response that the left has not held for a very long time. And like when I had family that saw this, like they told, "Oh my gosh, Charlie died," and they would laugh. My family was like, "This is like monstrous."
yeah,
That it's
yeah.
not just a difference of like textual opinion, but there's like a dispositional, like soul level distinction that's going on. I had some friends being like, texting me like, "I think we have to segregate the left and the right." Like they're realizing like it's actually a difference of the heart, and it's not
Well,
a difference of just
Uh,
moral or like a
theory.
weird
Yeah,
social media share, quick share. It's like, no, these are
yeah.
like meditated philosophies
right.
that have grown into like emotional
It's a
demons. Like it's
deep-seated
horrifying.
mindset. It's a
Yeah.
deep-seated
Yes.
mindset that is brought about by ideological subversion over time, where you now have a generation. And again, I think the component here, the Marxist component, is we, and I'm speaking as if I'm on the left. We are the morally pure, right? And this is part of Taylor's show, and we are part of the solution. We are the solution to the
Yes.
world's problems
Right.
because we're morally pure.
So
So
this,
there's no sense of like what remember when Chesterton writes, "Dear sir, what you asked what was wrong with the world? I am." There's no sense of that.
yeah.
Like you got to be able to say, I'm also part of the problem. Like, the things that I've done wrong, the things that I'm capable of doing wrong. I'm part of the problem. And it's just like there's this whitewashing of the conscience
Well,
that the
Yeah,
leftists, that
but
the
notice,
ideology
well,
itself engenders.
and they will say, and I push this against my leftist friends. They goes, "No, no, no, I believe it's a social issue. It's a social issue." I'm like, "No, no. The only time you believe it's a social issue that we need to de-escalate is when you guys have gone too far. When you're burning the United States down. When there was the attempt on Trump's life. Anytime there was a clear, like indisputable example of when the left has gone too far, that is when they're interested in saying we are now to blame. But anything outside of that, it's always one sided. And as you said, it's always that view. The left is the solution, the right is the demons and the horrible, and they need to be removed from society.
yeah, I think we see this actually most explicitly in all the false flag operations that we've seen. So Mattress Girl, right? The declarations against the Duke lacrosse team, and there are many examples of those on the left trying to create a tragedy or an oppressive system or a supposed rape or things like that, which actually, right? Jesse Smollett. I mean, yeah, pick your poison, right? We need to change the system, and so lying and subterfuge is the way we have to do it because we simply can't find a critical mass of actual incidents where this thing occurs. And part
Yeah.
of the problem here is as you're saying, what is baked into the ideology itself. For conservatism, and this is one of the things that I'm writing, the idea is to conserve. The idea is to maintain those aspects and those structures and those traditions that have served humanity, that we've understood, grown. It doesn't mean that we can serve absolutely everything. We don't think, oh, well, we had slavery for most of humanity, so therefore we should do it, because that's wrong. That slavery, even the founding fathers understood that there was a contradiction in their belief system between slavery and individual rights, and they said, well, sooner or later we're going to have to deal with it. So conservatism doesn't say conserve everything. That's a straw man. But it does say conserve the certain the idea of liberty, not
The
of
wisdom of the
anarchy.
past,
Right.
the wisdom and knowledge of the past.
So
that is good.
But progressivism the left specifically, but progressivism writ large says, no, we need to be different than the past, right? I mean, that's the idea of progress. We're going to be better. But progressivism says, how do we get there? Well, we have to tear down the old systems because we have systematic oppression, systematic racism. So the systems themselves need to break down. The structures need to break down. There's patriarchy, so we need to break down the male hegemony. We need to break down the family. Why do you think Gavin Newsom and the California state legislature passed laws so that somebody from Texas could come to California and he could rip that 12-year-old child away from their parents and declare that 12-year-old child a ward of the state? Because he wants to break down the family structure. There, I mean, this is very, very radical.
Which, if you read Marx himself and not Trotsky, the other guy, that Engels, they want to destroy the family unit. They want to destroy that. It's explicit in the manifesto.
I mean, you know, go through Che Guevara. Look at Saul Alinsky. You know, all of these things, basically violence, destruction, revolution is the way that you achieve enlightenment. So it is central to the left. And this is why, as you say, I don't believe it can be said that this is a 50-50 problem. This is a problem on the right and the left. Are there individuals on the right, quote unquote, who have fostered violent means to an end? Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to deny that there are those who bomb abortion clinics, for example. But those who bomb abortion clinics are normally called out by cooler heads for saying you are creating an abdication from tradition. You are actually violating the core principles that we are standing for. Whereas on the left, if you're doing violence, you're actually reinforcing those ideologies that sit at the root of modern progressivism. I mean, I just can't see it any other way.
But this would be like my response, because I think that like the idea of, oh, they want to break down things, if it's families, if it's certain religious institutions, if it's certain ways of life, I still think that's a little bit too sanitary, even for like the conception of like natural human discourse and livelihood. They think that they're actually vile. It's not just the breaking down. They want to destroy. I think Tony said that they want to destroy these things. They do think that they're evil. It's not just, oh, we need to break down the family. And these are people who, you know, would write and say like the family is like a concentration camp. It's not just to say, oh, the family has some sort of rigid, you know, principles and slightly inflexible. They are saying that the family unit is in fact evil, and as a moral justification, or as a moral duty, sorry, it needs to be torn down. And that's where I would say that I would say the byproduct of moral conviction that has no resolution in almost every case turns to violence. And so it's going in anyone who holds moral conviction and that moral conviction is postponed by evil, it always resorts to violence in some way or another. And so when the left, the left has their moral views, and their moral views have been postponed by what they believe is evil. Their moral views of destroying the family has been postponed by people on the right. And so those have to be destroyed. Yes. Yeah. And that was the one thing that I think, I mean, I read your article, Tony. I think that was one thing I would correct.
Yeah, tell me. Go ahead. Because this is what we do. We correct each other.
Yes. I think it.
Yeah.
Because it's.
I did write it very quickly the night of. So
no. Well, I think you did the right thing. Yeah. I think it's because so shortly after he was assassinated.
I can pull it.
There was a lot of back and forth, like, because the first thing that came to everyone's mind was like, not the first thing that came to everyone's mind. It was like there were those who were his friends and family, and I think everyone understood like the response of the friends and family as being tragic and horrifying, and all of those things we all inherently understood. What I began to notice very quickly was among those who were not necessarily his friends, they could have been people who knew of him. I would say I put me in this camp. I didn't text Charlie. I like knew of him. I had seen him a few times. I'd been a few of his classes. He was like a flesh and blood person. We had him out for an event just a few months ago, where it was like, okay, I should not be this upset because I didn't know him that well. But so many of us would go back and go back, but we are very upset.
Yes.
I had a friend even email me, he's in law enforcement. He's like, I sat down and talked to my family about this. Like, there is a level of risk to my job. And I told my family this, like, if I were to die in my position, I would realize like it was a risk I was willing to take, and that was the natural consequence. And it would be troubling and horrifying, but there was at least an internal logic to that that would say,
Yep.
not that it was justified or expected, but that it was just a risk.
Well,
He said,
yeah.
but when
Yeah, go
but when they were thinking about Charlie, it was like there was something very much different. And when I would talk to different people, there was always like this idea of like he was like the kid that everyone like loved in a way. Like he was trying to do what he thought was best. He had these few biblical principles and that turned into political stances. He was going out, he had this sort of like, it was almost like this like myth, like in the Tolkien sense of mythology, like there was the young guy who was like, I know that there are a few things that are right, and I'm just gonna, go out and see how I can do this. I don't have a plan how this is necessarily gonna work or where it's gonna land, but I'm gonna go out and do it. It's like this. I was talking to a friend over lunch. It was like that, like what youth is praised about in every book of fiction that you read, the idea of just sort of throwing caution to the wind and going out to the world and seeing what happens. He did that, and he had more success than anyone could imagine or even hope for. And then and then I think what becomes difficult is like he did all those things, and then you said something. I'm trying to find where you said it in here. It was like he did what he was finally killed by those he was fighting against, or something like that. Something like that was in this.
Yeah, the ideology he was fighting against wound up killing him.
But I think it was more than that. I think it was like he was killed by the ideology he was fighting against with the people that he loved. I think that was what, in a very important way, pushed people over. That he was not supposed to be part of this like calculated risk of like a political operator. He wasn't signing bills. He wasn't arresting people. He was going to places where difficult conversations are supposed to be happening. And it was sort of in that, and that was the risk. I mean, before the evening event, where he would be like, everyone who hates me, please come to the front. That's who I need to talk to. Right. And it was, and I think on top of that, which was so like despising and cowardly, as to know it was the person in the very back that ended up shooting him. Right. It wasn't the person who was invited to the front.
Yeah.
It's these sorts of things, I think, for those who are not close to his friend, like that were not like in his life daily, they saw that and it's like, it's almost like a paternal reaction saying like, if like society is worth it, you know what I mean? Like you're now talking about defending a good person.
Good man. What's that poem where our youngest and our brightest were cut down before us? There's a poem that goes like that. I can't remember. Maybe sounds like something that maybe Yeats or something would have written, or Matthew Arnold. But that's the feel it had. Our best and our brightest are being cut down before us. And Lenny, I'll let you get into it. And also, I mean, I agree. Anthony Esolen, the great Anthony Esolen, made the good point. This wasn't a public official. When a president gets shot at, we feel that it's tragic, but we also have that innate sense. Hey, this kind of comes with the job. You're the most powerful man in the world. People are out to get you. That's part of the job. And even if, other kinds of public officials, senators, so like Robert Kennedy and stuff, they were public officials. This guy's like, Charlie's just like, it felt like, it's like, this is what we do. We go out on campuses. I mean, we're not as successful or as effective by no means, but this is just a guy, right? Who's just trying to have conversations about politics, about the hard things, religion and politics, right? And also, of course, the youth as well. When I saw a picture of his wife and kids, and I love the fact that he would always turn his kids' faces around, right? Like that just showed care. Like, that's why it felt like, okay, I had to write something.
Well, and I think what's happened, and to Logan's point, this killing for many, many people have taken the abstraction, the warnings that we have offered. I mean, I've been talking about this for years now, about how we are degrading and devolving as a society, how we're headed for a train wreck. It took that out of abstraction and put it into a concrete image because people could see it. And one gentleman said, I'm on the left, but when I see these people celebrate, I realize it's not just the shooter and it's not just Charlie Kirk, because Kirk was gunned down for the same ideas that my family expresses, that my parents express, that my loved ones, that my neighbor tells me of, that my cousins or my siblings hold. And I realize that those people who are celebrating want them dead too, because they're
Yeah.
saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And now I get it. Now
I-
now I get it. And I think that's fair that, some of this needs to happen. I think it's also, and this is why I've never been a fan of cancel culture. However, what's been happening is that I think there are certain actions that cross specific social boundaries. For example, I believe that the smash and grab looters need to be taken out and have a punishment befit them that is greater than what you would normally give a standard shoplifter, because what they're doing is through their actions and through their success, they're encouraging others. Take any pro-Palestinian blocking the freeway with traffic. Those people shouldn't be let out on a misdemeanor charge of trespassing on freeways. What they're doing is something different. The intent is to disrupt society, and they need to have a harsher punishment. So while people who celebrate Charlie Kirk, and I realized this, I read an article where the guy's saying, look, one of the problems in social media is that any thought that pops into your head, you can now spill out across the country and have millions read it. It used to be, a guy would cut you off. Yeah, I'd hate that guy. I want to kill him. Or I'd really like to take a sniper to my boss, right? We always have these thoughts internally, but this internal dialogue normally stayed internal. After social media shows up, now everybody expresses it openly. And so should we hold these people accountable for those expressions, even though we all have them? And my thought is, yes, I think we need to, because what it does is it normalizes that ideology. Oh, so many people are thinking this way. It's okay for me to not merely think this way, but to now act on it, or to now grow it, or to fester it, right? To develop it. And so while I'm not a big cancel culture guy, and I don't think because you hold a political view on this side of the aisle or on that side of the aisle, that should cause you to lose your job, there's something about celebrating death specifically that should be so egregious societally that you say, we don't want to associate with you anymore. And I see that is the only way that those people would actually pull back and maybe keep their private thoughts private. I don't know any other effective way to get that message across, that it's that socially egregious.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard topic. I think we'd have to think and do that, another episode on that. Because, it's like, I don't know, like, I mean, I could think of situations where like maybe somebody snipes an actual dictator, right? And then, you may not.
Oh, I cheered when Osama bin Laden was taken out.
Yeah, right. I mean, so there are, I mean, and then one worries about obviously what probably the main thing, not the main thing. I don't know if it's the main thing, but certainly one thing that he clearly died for was free speech. So, I mean, but yeah, you're right. At the same time, there is a boundary line at some point where, and it might depend on what office or role or function a particular person is fulfilling, whether or not, there'd have to be investigation case by case into, but yeah, I mean, I would think like Babylon Bee put up a Not the Bee article where they listed off just several tweets that that people had posted after Charlie's death, very just egregious ones. and like school teacher in Oklahoma, principal of a school here. And like, obviously, I mean, I think that those people should get fired. I mean, there's got to be some consequences for
Yeah,
for
this isn't
actions,
what I'm saying.
right?
Like, it's not just a free speech question. Like when Lenny had said like, "Oh, of
Yeah.
course I celebrated when Osama bin Laden was killed." It's like, and the assumption of that is, yeah, because he was like a clearly evil person who did
Yeah.
clearly evil things. But when you see people doing that to Charlie, like that's the same belief structure. Oh, of course, it was like a clearly evil person doing clearly evil things, and we're looking at someone who's like a clearly good person, clearly doing good things, and
Yeah.
that goes back to the point that I'm saying is like we're at a point where if the right doesn't do something, and I think the Trump administration, based off how their higher officials have at least been messaging, you had Rubio basically say foreigners who celebrate the assassination are not welcome in this country. Give us their information, we'll revoke their visas, we'll deport them. Seeing how Vance responded, seeing how Trump basically connected this assassination with his attempted assassination, and that the leftist ideology must be dismantled, and he expanded it to the attacks upon our judicial system, upon our law enforcement. The Trump administration, at least it seems like by their messaging, they're grappling with this idea of like, if there is not a significant enough response, a proportional response to the crime that was committed and supported morally by a vast number of people, what happens to the right's political structures? Because those will collapse when there's a clear moral conviction that does not end with some form of real consequence. Right now, it's a little bit more vigilante in the sense they're just using sort of the free market of ideas and saying, hey, business owner A, or business
Right.
owner B, look at what your employees are doing. Do you agree? And they're firing them. And that's been sort of like appeasing the interest at this moment because there is a great moral transgression and there should be consequences for like gross moral misbehavior. The question is what kind of official action is that going to look like? And I think that's what a lot of people are really trying to like figure out. And if that's sort of the,
Yeah.
obviously pray for Charlie and his family and TPUSA and all of those. But the big, I guess the administrative prayer is the wisdom to know we do need to respond proportionally. And I
Right.
don't know, and the left does, I think, know that there will be a response, and I think they're afraid it will be proportional. I think it would be wise for it to be proportional. The caution, of course, is it becomes disproportional.
Right.
It needs to be
Yeah.
legal into the full force of law.
And that's a very, very important point, and I think we need to shift this because there's a lot of folks who may be listening who are Christians and
Yeah. I
understanding
want
this
to shift to the
through
Christian
a Christian belief,
responses.
because part of
Yeah.
the problem in our society has been that we use our politics to help shape our religion as opposed to be using our Christianity to shape our politics. And when I say, it may be appropriate for certain individuals to lose their jobs, I'm not even saying that everybody who celebrates should lose their job. There are foolish people who are young
Yeah.
who have bought into this, and let's put it this way: the the millennials and beyond, Gen Z, Alpha, have it really tough because their adolescence and their college years are captured forever online. And if you were to hold up most anybody's mistakes that they made when they were young and stupid, oh my gosh, how many people would be able to pass for this? And this is why I'm concerned that even if you are complicit in that regard, you have to be, as a Christian, you have to understand that before Romans 13 is there, that the government does not wield the sword for no purpose. And legally, appropriately, the government, the legal structures that we have should take action. But before Romans 13, you do have Romans 12 that says, vengeance is mine. I will repay. Pray for those who persecute you. You have all of those scriptures as well. And we can't simply demonize every single individual because they have a D after their name. With that won't work either. That's not the Christian way. That's not how Christianity even advanced in the first few centuries. I mean, read Tertullian, right?
Yeah.
He said, we are more moral than they're being killed. Christians, Stephen called out, he did verbally call out the hypocrisy of the Jewish hierarchy, but he was willing to be stoned for it. Jesus was taken, and there is no greater affront or violation of morality than Jesus being arrested and basically executed for something he didn't do. And yet the guy who was arresting him, who had his ear cut off by Jesus' disciple, Jesus healed him. Jesus healed Malchus's ear, even though he was in the act of perpetrating a crime against Jesus himself. So as individual Christians, I think, number one, I think we need to understand that that's our model. That was always the model of the first century church. And it was, as Tertullian said, the blood of the church became seed. It was the thing that people found attractive and drew them to the faith. And that's what changed the minds of the society. And beyond that, they were willing to suffer. They were willing to take it. And that's something I think that we don't talk enough about. That one of the things that happens within Christendom is you have to be willing to suffer, because of course the world is going to be against you. Of course the devil is going to attack you. Of course there's going to be evil. That's the whole point. And when I look at all of these different ideologies, and someone says, well, where do you start? Well, I start with Christianity, because every other ideology is really a heresy of Christianity. Marxism could not grow out of Islam. Marxism could not grow out of Eastern philosophy. It's a heresy of Christianity. Even modern progressivism have warped the idea that all men are created equal, that all men are equally endowed with inherent worth. And they use that as the cudgel to try and beat those who don't agree with them into submission. One of the things so that I think that we need to do is just keep coming back to that message. Is it doesn't work. There is no grounding for leftist ideology. There's, as you said, because there's no moral foundation, then politics becomes their moral foundation. Might makes right, and whatever we say, that's the moral law of the land. And it becomes easy then to vilify. And so I think as Christians, I think that's one of the things that we really need to keep in mind.
Logan?
I mean, let me push back a little bit on that, because I agree with a lot of what Lenny said. There's some things I would disagree. I think I would begin by saying that I would be of the camp of like people who celebrate minimally lose their job, all of them immediately. If it was the world in which I was able to govern, easy decision. If they celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk, like minimally lose your job, whatever financial consequences come from there. If there's any other further legal ramifications, pursue all those options. Because I do think there's a radical difference between sort of planting the seeds of the church and how a Christian society should operate. And I don't know if taking it is how a Christian society should operate. If a Christian society, which is bedrocks within the natural law tradition, is that there are certain moral principles that govern the way in which certain society should operate, there should be direct and immediate consequences. And I think that's, the idea that law should be the reigning order of things is an inherently Christian principle.
I agree with that.
And so, like, when we have questions of like, the assassination situation, I think the debate should be is like, we do believe that the law should govern and that the law should dictate the response. What is a interesting conversation to have is like, that doesn't leave a lot of room for the individual to respond, besides just posting a whole bunch of stuff on social media. And so right now, the only option is getting them fired from their job. The question is like, that just seems to be the response for everything. Are there other ways? Now, historically speaking, everyone was a member of the church, and that meant church discipline and all these other sorts of things for moral misbehavior. But that doesn't exist anymore. There's no like social institutions that are able to punish people except their job, which is a very strange phenomenon.
Yeah.
And
that's a
so
good point.
I could see that the question being like, well, is losing your job for everything right? You inherently would say prudentially no, because it seems like something needs to be tailored to the direct act. But if that's the only option, then that's the only thing you can do. And so
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I could not think of any other disciplinary arm or mechanism other than somebody loses their
yeah, like maybe
occupation.
banning them
Well,
off
well,
social media
social
would be
standing,
another
that
like, but
Because
these
the
all
church isn't
corporate
going to do
responses.
anything. I'll tell you, with regards to the church, you should. I mean, and we were going to kind of get. You could look at the responses by Christians, by a lot of Christians. I'll pull one up here right
Oh,
now.
it's been horrific.
They're
generally.
terrible. I mean, and where it's like, I mean, this here's like a perfect example. I'm going to call this woman out because she writes for Patheos, and this is her ridiculous article. Now it's under the Catholic section. Can you guys see this? Violence was the very last word. This by, I'm calling her out, Mary Pizzullo, who writes for the Catholic section of Patheos. She talks about Charlie Kirk being shot. First sentence, first paragraph. There was Kirk, the notorious right-wing influencer, who once called Martin Luther King awful and not a good person. I've just quoted on a context. We know what he was talking about. He's talking about Martin Luther King Jr.'s affairs, adulterous affairs, right? She doesn't mention that, though. Charlie Kirk, who said, I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that you can have the Second Amendment to protect our God-given rights. That is a prudent deal, is rational. Of course, she doesn't cite it. She doesn't give a source, which is typical. Takes it out of context. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. Charlie Kirk, who said, I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage, which is probably a reference to Joe Rigney's book, right? He probably had just read Joe Rigney's book, Toxic Empathy. But this is how this woman starts off her column about then going on to sort of offer this milquetoast lament about violence in general, right? Kirk was sitting a bit smugly in a chair with a microphone, you know, and and then she goes on to talk about how his last word was violence, to sort of suggest, again, imply, see, Charlie Kirk talked about violence a lot and gun rights. Therefore, although she doesn't say this explicitly in the article, he kind of got what he deserved, right?
Oh yeah,
This
that's
is a
the
Catholic
live by the
columnist.
sword.
Is
The
any
live by the
bishop in
sword,
the
die
Catholic
by the sword.
Church? Yeah. Is any bishop in the Catholic Church going to call this woman out? Is whatever Catholic church she goes to, is the local priest going to do anything about that column she wrote? No. There's going to be no
most
discipline
Christian
from the
responses have been
Catholic
live by the
Church,
sword,
her
die by
local
the sword.
Catholic
Yeah.
Church, for writing that kind of, it's not just bad writing. It's implying that he sort of had it coming, didn't he? I'll call her out when I get around to. Well, we just did. I hope she sees it.
Yeah, but that's been the by and large Christian response. The point that I'm trying to make is like the conversation that I think should be happening is, what does, like, for the right, the left is, because the question, okay, so the question of the right should be, what does punishing people on the left look like? That is the conversation that should be happen. But when you tell Christians that, they're like, well, that seems so bad and unnecessary, and we love our neighbors. Like, okay, you're already being punished by the left and right all the time. They're going to go after you. They're going to go after your jobs. They're going to go after your family. They're going to go after anything that you've built that you're happy about. They will try to demonize those things, and they have done that for a very long time. It's not isolation. The question, though, is, in a Christian society, and I mean broadly Christian society, that holds to fundamentally Christian foundation for its governance, what does it look to punish people who morally flaunt that foundation? What do you do? And we don't have those conversations. And we should, and I don't think the Bible is against having those conversations. I don't think there's an
No,
inherent view of saying,
and
like,
again, there
if you
needs to be
punish people,
something.
yeah, and it's like, and that's what I'm saying. And the idea that we would even have a conversation about the extent of punishment for an assassination just shows how much it's gone one way for so long. Like, there should be questions about, like, punishing your neighbor for, like, being indecent, right? Like, And I'm not even mean indecent like going in public naked. I mean like just indecent behavior or like low level immoral behavior. We're not even talking about the level of like crime, like the
Yeah.
idea of like Christians punishing your neighbor who's stealing from your neighbor. Like that is like still like low level moral questions that we don't even talk about. Like these kinds of punishments need to be discussed, because if they're not discussed, what you're going to get is reaction. Because, and again, I'm going to go back to this, like if you have strong moral convictions, and the Bible has strong moral convictions, you're going to hope or seek justice. And when you have a government that is supposed to be doing those things, you're going to look for those avenues. But if you don't have the means to have those conversations, or have the conversation what the means should look like, they're just going to be reactions. And we can't just be doing reaction. We need to be having these discussions so that we have a premeditated understanding of what we're doing, the extent of what that's going to happen. And I think that's what's going to be happening in the next couple of days anyways, like, or maybe in a week or so. I think it's going to be most primarily ceremony and sadness and reflection for at least a week, 2 weeks. And then the question is going to be, okay, so what does the punishment look like and how far are we going to go?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the and it's tough. In decades past, in generations past, there was a much firmer social cohesion, even within communities. It wasn't necessarily even church. I mean, you wouldn't go to different churches, but you would go to the same Elks Lodge. You knew all your neighbors across the street, and I think Charles Murray in Coming Apart makes the point that the manager and the floor worker in the warehouse, they lived on the same street. The manager would buy his suit off the rack. The floor worker would be blue collar guy, but they still saw each other at the grocery store. They still said hello, talked about the lawns, things like that. Because that existed, then the community would also police the actions of all. So, for example, if you watch It's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
and George Bailey, right, as a kid, doesn't deliver the drugs, and the druggist is the one who slaps his ear back. We take that as a shock. How could he even imagine child abuse? But no, that was common in those days. Everybody understood that for the sake of the community, nobody should rise themselves above it. Now, he was wrong in that instance. Misunderstood. But the idea of the entire community holds a responsibility was mitigated by the fact that the entire community knew each other. So if one person stepped outside of their bounds and over criticized or over punished, the other people in society could pull him down too. So because society isn't communal anymore, it's individuated, we don't have that structure to say everybody should be policing the kids. Matter of fact, it works the opposite way. Everybody wants to impose their own understanding upon another. And so that entire system now doesn't exist. So how do we create something else that will work in a society where everyone is the ultimate rule of law to themselves?
But yet connected.
But you have to live
technology.
in a society. Yeah, you have to live as a culture of interconnected people.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that answer is. That's a really
big
hard question.
I mean, that's a big question. I mean, this is like the small town community, it policed its own because everybody knew each other. You had real relationships, which is one of the things that Kirk obviously was famous for, right? I mean, the quote, one of his clips going around is exactly about that. We need to continue to have human connections and real conversations. Otherwise, it's going to get violent. Obviously, he was his own prophet. But now it's like the community's virtual. We haven't figured that piece out. We haven't. I mean, that idea of, hey, well, now we got a global virtual community. We want free speech, but it's not a real human connection. It is, but it's not.
It's a simulated connection.
It's a
matter
simulated
of fact. The thing about
connection.
social media that's ironic is it makes us less and less social and more individually tailored to our own ideologies and our own beliefs, because all we hear is the feedback loop. All we hear is
and I wouldn't be surprised, and I think this is going to come out, if the family of this kid was fairly decent, and that
I think
most
so.
of his radicalized behavior was through social media and
And the college.
the virtual media and whatever college he was at. We don't know what college he was, if he was in.
He got a University of Utah, I believe is his
Okay.
was a full ride
Well,
scholarship.
And that
And
brings
if you
me,
watch that video,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking. You see this kid
because he was
excited
he was
about-
very bright too. He's
yeah,
very,
and
very
it's
bright.
like but that
Yeah.
and so maybe one step, maybe Victor Davis Hanson is right. Maybe one step is to make sure that universities have a balance of perspective.
Well, this is, I think, the other piece, and because we talked about, okay, one thing that could be done is people get fired for their job for being vile, just for the vileness of their speech, and but the other entity, and this is why we kind of opened with, and I think the other entity, the thing that needs to be changed is the university, because where all the leftist, the liberal media, the leftist politicians, they all go to school. I mean, this was Francis Schaeffer's, I think maybe I don't say his great insight, because it goes back to Plato. Plato understood whoever rules the academy is going to rule the society, right? Julian the Apostate. I've written about this so many times. What was the first thing he did when Constantinus II died? And he came back in as the last of the pagan emperors. Get all the Christians out of the schools. Forbid the Christians from teaching in the schools. Got to repaganize the academy. And if that does not change, if there's not a real turn, and that's why Charlie was on the campuses. That's what he was doing. I mean, he knew that. I don't know if he knew that from reading Plato or reading about church history, if he just sort of intuited it, that you got to get the schools, you got to get the educational institutions back on track, because that's where the radicalization always happens. Always.
It's interesting. I read an article in Reason magazine this morning talking about the question of violence and asking, where did all of the violent people from the early 70s go? If you remember, there was quite a number of different terrorist type attacks throughout that period, and they said, well, they really didn't get arrested. They got put in academic positions, and so we're seeing the fruit of that in our society today. So
we got to get going soon. We're going to wrap this up. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the shooting itself. I mean, we talked about leftist ideology, the cult of the victim. We talked about the problem with the academy, the universities. That is really the front line, I think, of the battlefield. The online issue, policing of and how to have real consequences for people's indecent, unethical behavior. I want to end on some kind of positive. I want to talk about Charlie Kirk's legacy. I want to talk about, as I opened up with, and as I put in the article, I think there's good reason to use the term martyr for Kirk. And I don't use that lightly, because we're church, we're Christians. We study church history. When we think of martyrs, we're thinking of people who walked into the lion's den and got, killed by the Romans. We're thinking of people who maybe usually were killed by some kind of governing or state entity for the sake of the Christian faith. Or we think of recently of the Egyptian Coptic priests beheaded by ISIS back in, what was it, 2016?
Yeah, look at the Nigerian
faith, the Nigerian church. My brother's in Nigeria right now, and in the part of Nigeria where Boko Haram does most of its terror. But there's also been Christians throughout in history who have been killed for political reasons. I think like Thomas More is often considered a martyr. I don't think the Nazis asked Bonhoeffer to renounce Jesus before they hung him, or Edith Stein, or Franz Jägerstätter, or think of someone like Maximilian Kolbe dying in the concentration camp. I don't know. It's not like anybody said, renounce your faith, otherwise we're going to kill you. But we would still, I think, consider them martyrs. They died for their Christian witness or doing something that was a testimony to the Christian faith, right? And I'm willing at this point to put Charlie Kirk in that category. I don't know. I want to hear your guys' thoughts, though.
Well, and also obviously there can be political martyrdom as well as religious martyrdom.
I mean, as a political martyr, yes, he died for the cause,
and
that's obvious.
Not merely died for the cause.
Yeah.
His solution to the cause was, again, consistent with his conservative principles of open debate, free speech. This is what the university is supposed to do. He's even doing it within the bounds of the boundary of the institution and how those institutions are supposed to function. You can't do this too much better than what he was doing. And I've done the same type of thing many times. I have many different instances across multiple campuses where I've had these kinds of forums. Now my tact obviously was a little different because people are different. But to be shot and killed for doing the thing in the way that you're supposed to be doing it, you have to say that it's more than just it's more than just a murder. This crime rises to a level above it, and to tell you the truth, it breaks my heart for both sides. As you say, I didn't rejoice. I'm not happy. I'm not cheering that Tyler Robinson was captured. I'm relieved. I'm glad that justice will be brought to bear. But when I look at some of the clips of his past, I lament that the university has turned into this thing that, that basically changes people into these monsters because it lets sin have its head. It lets sin take free reign. And when you allow sin to take free reign, this is what you get. So I think Charlie Kirk was trying to do the opposite of that. He's saying we can't, as a civilization, do that. I think James Lindsay put a really good post together as well, civilization versus catharsis, where just go out and get him is the catharsis point. But I think Charlie Kirk wouldn't have it that way. And isn't that what a representative of a movement's supposed to do? He not only lived out what it is, he taught the things that he taught should be then now emulated by those who are trying to honor him. And I think that's the best way to approach him.
I mean, I think his death should just motivate all of us to double and triple our efforts in our evangelism, in our attempt to rewrite the wrong course that this country's on. There's just, it has that weight. It even though it was just one man, again, as I said in the beginning, it had the weight of something like a 9/11 to just reinvigorate those who are trying to do right and to forge on in their enterprises and their projects, not just to make the country get great again in like the economic or political, but to make it moral again, to make it good.
Like I said, I wrote this in the article that I'm working on. It sometimes history turns not on the biggest events, but on small events that encapsulate something that has been festering for a long, long time. Yeah. So, for example, Rodney King. The fact that some guy was testing out his video camera and caught 4 officers, in the LA area beating on a guy, all the effects of that beating, although it's just one man, BLM is downstream from that, right? The 2020 riots are downstream for that. The Trayvon Martin, all of the stuff that you hear flows out of that Rodney King. It changed America. That one incident, that one capture on video changed America and policing standards and so many other things. It had ripple effects far beyond its initial, what people might objectively call its weight. And I think Charlie Kirk's assassination will kind of have a similar thing. It bursts through, like we talked about, in clear color what people have been complaining about for a long time, and it's and you're getting a lot of people saying we just can't live like that anymore.
Logan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like clearly the case that he'd be labeled as a martyr. I think because I mean he was political in a sense, but like it was a very much a continuation from the beliefs that he held. It wasn't that he was going to college campuses with a political ideology. It was there were certain things that were true, and he wanted to inspire the next generation to believe those things. Those things were the biblical principles. They had the family values that end up becoming political realities, and he did everything he could to become that kind of person. And I don't see, and I know there's like conversations about, oh, is that an appropriate title or not? I think if just people who followed him long enough, outside just his close friends and even the institutions he worked alongside with, but like the people who knew who he was and what he was doing, yeah, I think the assassination is that he would be turned into a martyr for the general place that we're at, because he represented so many of those things. Like, and then I think we were texting about it like the day of or the day after, where it was like it's hard that like he wasn't a pastor or something like that, but it was just so thoroughly interconnected. And even the other things, like for example, there was this like post I shared where, I mean, I shared it when he posted it a long time ago, but it was like he just said, "Get married, have kids, and stop partying to oblivion. Leave a legacy. Be courageous. Happy Sunday. God bless all the parents out there." Like it's such an intersection of sort of like the human experience in a way. It wasn't just a theologian or just an academic or just an activist or just a parent or just a concerned high school student or that had a problem with his teacher. He was just sort of like the intersection of all these things, and he wanted to bring into dialogue those convictions that he had with the college students, and he was super successful with that. And I think the assassination does call appropriately that sort of gut check, like you mentioned, Tony. Like the I think actually Matt Walsh put it into good. I mean, I follow Matt Walsh here and there. I think he's kind of an interesting guy, but I actually think he said it best, where he said he came a little pretty unhinged, I think, at some points. I think probably just completely in the right in all of it, but he said something of like at least the inspiring part, or at least the lesson to be learned, and I think this applies for Christians and non-Christians, anyone, is that to, when he was basically doom scrolling through all of the people celebrating Charlie's death, was that it should inspire you to live such a life that when you die, like evil people celebrate. I think that is like a good thing to take away, is to realize that
Yeah.
if you're not living, like that's the kind of life he lived, and he was on it all the time. Like the guy was just everywhere. And when I talked to all these friends and people in media and all that kind of stuff, all of them were like, it seemed like he was seeing everyone every month. And people were like, he's all the time, he has time to text me back and all these things. It's like he was just on it on so many levels. And I think that's the thing that the gut check could be just to ourselves. Like, are we on it? Are we in a place that if we died today, evil people would be happy? And if they're not, then the question is, what do I need to do so that's the case?
Yeah. Evil people were happy when they saw Jesus crucified on the cross and thought he was dead. And I don't want to over spiritual, but Charlie Kirk's in heaven, or he's with the Lord. And what needs to continue, be revivified, and as I said before, is the movement, right? I mean, the martyr dies and the movement goes on. A soldier dies, the mission is still on, right? When we lost soldiers in Afghanistan, you grieved, the mission goes on. There's still a mission. And I would just say, sort of to close out here, we all have to stay on mission. Got to stay on point. And I would encourage it, and we're like not nearly as effective or as Charlie Kirk, but we try and do a lot of the same things. And our other brothers out there who are doing the same things online or in public, we got to double down and continue to stay on mission. Yeah, I mean, I'm calling him a martyr for the cause. And I think that is not just a political cause, but that is the cause of Christ as well. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this time. Maybe we'll meet again next week and discuss some of these other more theoretical issues. They certainly need to be hashed out given what's happened. I do think, though, in going forward in the future of this country, 9/10 and 9/11, will both be hand in hand, have the same kind of significance for our nation. So, and both will be remembered. So, all right, guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks. Everybody for joining us. God bless.
Thank you.